The call came in on a Tuesday, not to the courtroom, not through any official channel, but to the clerk's office, which was how these things usually started when someone wanted to test the water before committing to anything. The woman on the phone didn't identify herself immediately. She asked general questions about scheduling, about how cases were typically handled, about whether there was any flexibility in the process for people with certain circumstances. The clerk, who had worked in that building for 11 years and had heard variations of this conversation more times than she cared to remember, answered each question politely and told the caller that all matters were handled by the judge and that the process was the same for everyone. The caller thanked her and hung up. 2 days later, Margaret Calloway walked through the front doors of the Providence Municipal Court. She was 61 years old, silver-haired, well-dressed, the kind of composed that takes years to cultivate. Her husband was State Senator Douglas Calloway, a man who had been in Rhode Island politics for over 2 decades. His name came up in conversations about the governor's office. He sat on 3 committees. He had opinions about infrastructure and education funding that got quoted in newspapers. He was, by most measures, a man of significant standing in the state. Margaret Calloway had received 2 citations, one for running a red light on a street with a traffic camera, one for an expired registration that had apparently been expired for 7 months. Neither violation was particularly remarkable. People came through the court every day with exactly these kinds of tickets. What made this morning different had nothing to do with the citations themselves. She had come with someone, a man in a dark suit who sat in the gallery and did not speak to anyone. He had the particular stillness of someone who was there professionally, not a lawyer, at least not in any role that had been formally declared to the court. He sat with his hands folded and watched the proceedings with the patient attention of someone who was there to observe and report back. Judge Caprio worked through the morning docket the way he always did, methodically, humanely, giving each person his genuine attention. A young man with a speeding ticket and a new baby at home. An elderly woman confused about why her registration had lapsed. A college student who had genuinely not understood that parking in a permit zone without a permit applied to everyone, including him. Case by case, person by person, the morning moved forward. When Margaret Calloway's name was called, she rose with the ease of someone who had navigated formal settings her entire adult life. She approached the bench without hesitation. She smiled at Judge Caprio the way people smile when they want to establish warmth before business begins. It was a practiced smile, not dishonest exactly, but constructed. Judge Caprio greeted her the way he greeted everyone. He asked her how she was doing. He looked at her file. He noted the 2 violations and asked her if she wanted to tell him what had happened. She said the red light citation was a mistake. She said the camera must have malfunctioned or caught her in a moment of ambiguity at the very edge of the yellow. She said she was a careful driver. She said she had never had a serious violation in her life. Judge Caprio listened. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he looked at the camera data in the file, which showed her vehicle entering the intersection 1 full second after the light had turned red. Not at the edge of anything, 1 full second. He told her what the record showed, gently but plainly. She said she didn't want to dispute the court's records. She said she was sure there was some explanation. She moved on. She addressed the registration next. She said it had been an oversight. She said her household managed many things and sometimes details slipped through. She said she took full responsibility. Judge Caprio nodded. He appreciated when people took responsibility. He said so often. It changed something in the room when someone stood before him and didn't make excuses. He was about to say something along those lines when Margaret Calloway did something unexpected. She reached into her bag. She placed a sealed envelope on the surface in front of her. She slid it forward slightly in a gesture that was casual, almost offhand, as if she were passing a note at a dinner party. She said she wanted to make a contribution to whatever fund or program the court supported for community benefit. She said she understood that courts sometimes had discretionary funds for local causes. She said she was happy to be generous. She said her family believed in giving back to Providence. The courtroom went very still. There were perhaps 30 people in the gallery at that moment. Court officers, a reporter who covered municipal proceedings twice a week for a local paper. The man in the dark suit, who had not moved but whose attention had sharpened visibly, Judge Caprio looked at the envelope. He did not touch it. He looked at it the way you look at something that has just changed the nature of a conversation entirely. He looked up at her. He asked her very slowly what was in the envelope. She maintained her composure. She said it was a personal check. She said it was meant as a gesture of goodwill toward the community. She said she hoped the court might direct it toward a worthy cause. Judge Caprio sat back. He was quiet for a moment that felt much longer than it was. The people in that gallery who had been to his courtroom before, who had watched him handle hundreds of cases, recognized something in that pause. It wasn't uncertainty. It was the opposite of uncertainty. It was a man deciding exactly how to say what he was about to say, because what he was about to say mattered, and he wanted to land correctly. He said he appreciated charitable impulses. He said he genuinely did. He said that giving to a community was something he respected. And then he said that what she had just done in this courtroom, at this moment, in front of these people, was not a charitable gesture. He said that presenting a financial instrument to a judge during the adjudication of your own case was not goodwill. He said it had a name. He said he was going to be very generous in not using that name out loud right now, but that he wanted her to understand with absolute clarity what she had just attempted. She started to speak. He continued. He said that he had been on this bench for a very long time. He said he had seen a great many things. He said people came to him in desperation, in confusion, in grief. He said he had seen people offer him things out of genuine panic, not understanding the line they were crossing, and in those cases he had always tried to meet them with patience and explanation. But he said that what he had just witnessed did not feel like panic or confusion. He said it felt deliberate. He said the envelope was sealed. He said she had it ready. He said she had placed it in front of him with the practiced ease of someone who had done this kind of thing before, or who had watched it done, or who operated in circles where this was considered a reasonable approach to inconvenient situations. Her composure cracked slightly, not dramatically, just at the edges. He told her to take the envelope back. She reached forward and retrieved it. Her hand was not entirely steady. He said he was going to address her violations now, and that he wanted her full attention for what he was about to say, not because the violations themselves were severe, but because he wanted her to understand the context in which they were being addressed. He said that her husband served the people of Rhode Island. He said that public service was a calling he respected deeply. He said that the faith people placed in elected officials was something sacred, and that the families of those officials carried a version of that responsibility, whether they chose to or not. He said that when you were connected to public life in the way her family was connected to it, your conduct had weight beyond your own individual circumstances. He paused. He said that what she had done today in this room had weight. He said he hoped she understood that. She said nothing. He fined her the standard amounts on both violations. He did not reduce them. He did not increase them. He applied the law as it was written, which was what he would have done regardless, which was the entire point. He said one more thing before she stepped away. He said it quietly, but the room was quiet enough that everyone heard. He said that this courtroom was one of the last places in public life where money and position did not determine the outcome. He said he worked hard to keep it that way. He said it was not always easy. He said there were pressures he navigated that people in the gallery would never see. But he said that the moment a judge allowed an envelope to change a verdict, the courtroom ceased to be a courtroom. It became something else, something that served no one, something that betrayed every person who walked through those doors, trusting that the process was honest. He said he would not allow that. Not today. Not ever. Margaret Calloway walked back to her seat and gathered her things. The man in the dark suit stood as she approached. They left together without speaking to anyone. The reporter in the gallery was writing quickly. Outside the courtroom, in the corridor, one of the regular court officers mentioned to a colleague that in all his years in that building, he had seen a lot of nerve, but that he wasn't sure he had seen that particular flavor of it quite so cleanly executed. His colleague agreed. They both agreed that they had also never seen it go quite so badly for the person attempting it. By the following morning, the story had been picked up. Not the envelope specifically, because the reporter was careful and responsible and knew the difference between what he had witnessed and what he could prove in print, but the outline of it was there. A notable appearance, a notable response from the bench, a notably swift departure. Senator Callaway's office issued a brief statement saying that his wife had appeared in court to address routine traffic matters and that the family had great respect for the judicial process. The statement was 11 words longer than it needed to be, which was how you could tell it had been written carefully. In the days that followed, people in Providence talked about it the way they talked about things that confirmed something they already suspected about the world, something they wanted to be true but weren't always sure was, that there were still places where the attempt failed, where the envelope came back, where the man behind the bench looked at you and said plainly, without theater, without malice, with just the steady weight of someone who knew exactly what he stood for, not here. Judge Caprio had been that man for decades. He would be that man the next morning and the morning after that. The cases would keep coming. The violations would be mundane, and the people would be complicated, and occasionally someone would walk in with a sealed envelope and a famous last name and a smile built for rooms where that kind of thing worked. And every single time, the answer would be the same. Not here, not on this bench, not in this room. The envelope would come back across the table, and the law would be applied, and the next case would be called, and the work would continue quietly, without ceremony, the way honest things usually do.